So for those of you who are joining us for these roundtable conversations for the first time, welcome. We're really happy to have you here. My name is Katrina Plamondon. I'm the co-chair of the Canadian Coalition for Global Health Research's University Advisory Council. We have some people joining us who are not UAC members today, so I'll just give a tiny bit more content just so you have a sense of who we are and what we're doing today. So the UAC, University Advisory Council, is a table of people who are liaison or representative members from different universities across Canada. And we are starting to include some partners from outside of Canada as well. And all of these universities and colleges have some interest in global health. And our goal as a UAC is to really create a shared space for talking about emerging issues, trends, needs, and really trying to find ways to synergize our efforts, to learn together, to collaborate, and to really work as a united and in a really synergistic way as a connected global health community. So we have heard from our members, all of the work that we do is driven by what liaison members say their needs are. And so one of the things we've heard over the last year, especially in the context of COVID, and where we suddenly had to transition a year ago, more than a year ago now, to working and living and doing all of our stuff online. And so many of our members were saying that this had implications for their teaching, but also there were pressing issues that they were increasingly being asked to speak to. And so the roundtables are an opportunity for us to really highlight some of the work that's going on by liaison members, some of the initiatives that are being led across the country that show this synergy and collaboration between institutions, and also give you an opportunity to build your exposure, your knowledge, ideas about pressing issues. So today we're going to be talking about the roles of universities in One Planet Living, and hearing from a collaborative effort from a group of people from several different universities who I'll introduce gladly in just a moment. And our hope is to have really a rich conversation. So they'll have a bit of a conversation with some questions that speak to what is the concept, and then we'll have some opportunity for some dialogue at the end. We have several people joining us today from the Equity-Centered Knowledge Translation course, the CCGHR summer course. So welcome to those of you who are joining us. And we're going to get started. We are recording, and we'll make the recording available as a resource that might be useful for members and their teaching and their work, and also available for you to access. So it will be posted on the Coalition YouTube channel afterwards as well. So I'm just looking at my second screen, so I apologize for looking kind of over my shoulder, but I'll do just a quick round of intros, and then our panelists will also tell you a little bit more about themselves as we go around. So I'm so happy to welcome Corinne Schuster-Wallace from the University of Saskatchewan, Thomas Trudeau-James from University of Montreal, Cora Halsworth, who is joining us by video today. She's prepared a recording for us because she couldn't join us in person. She's from BCIT. Angela Day from Dalhousie. Joanne St. Charles from University of Montreal. I'm sorry, my French is so poor. I will let you say it properly when you introduce yourself. And Vic Neufeld, who many of you know, Professor Emeritus with McMaster and also with University of Victoria. And all connected to the CCGHR, the University Advisory Council, and doing amazing work with this One Planet Living group. And I'm so happy to turn it over to you now to introduce yourselves more fully, and for Corinne to guide us through a rich conversation. Over to you, Corinne. And
thank you ever so much, Katrina. It's a pleasure to be here today. I'm here with you from Saskatoon, Treaty 6 territory and traditional homeland of the Métis, and I am the co-chair of the Climate Change and Health Working Group with CCGHR. So as I say, it's a pleasure to be here and to have this event coordinated between the Working Group on Climate Change and Health and the UAC. So before we start the conversation today, as Katrina said, we have asked Cora to explain One Planet Living for us. She wasn't able to be here, but she has created a short video presentation. So Katrina, I think you have that queued and ready to go for us. So Cora's going to tell us what One Planet Living is all about.
No sound, Katrina. I realized I politely put myself on mute, which is not any good for you to hear the video. So I'm going to restart it. My apologies. I was trying to be polite. That doesn't work in this context. Hold on one second. I'm going to restart it. And I also, I almost never forget to do this, but I got distracted and I forgot to mention that I'm joining you from Kelowna in the beautiful Okanagan Valley, which is the traditional and unceded, which means there are no treaties, no surrender of the land in most of the province of British Columbia. And this is the traditional and unceded territory of the Syilx people. Okay, let me try this again. Here we go. Can someone let me know if you can hear me? Can I just get a thumbs up or someone unmute and interrupt me?
Hello, my name is Cora Halsworth. I'm coming to you from the unceded territory of the Lekwungen and Wasanic peoples, also known as Greater Victoria, British Columbia. I'm manager of EcoCity initiatives at the British Columbia Institute of Technology's Center for EcoCities. Through this role, I'm working with municipalities to apply science-based frameworks to support the transition to socially just cities that are in balance with nature. We're excited to be initiating work with the Canadian Coalition for Global Health to develop a pilot project with universities to develop and understand universities' ecological footprints and broader sustainability impacts. I'm also senior associate with One Earth, with whom I'm leading One Planet Saanich initiative. I've been asked to talk about the One Planet Living imperative and its implications for communities. So let's dig into that now. It's widely understood that we're in the midst of a climate crisis and that we're not meeting our global climate targets. We also know that climate change is only one of the planetary boundaries that we're bumping up against. We're also bumping up against other planetary limits like biosphere integrity and land system changes. The bottom line is that these global challenges are a result of humanity's collective overconsumption and inappropriate uses of Earth's resources. We've known for some time about the limits to growth because of the Earth's finite resource base and our ever-growing population. We also know that there's great disparity across the world and across our communities. We can't hope to address our environmental challenges if we don't address equity, health, and other social imperatives. These are interconnected challenges. Our key challenge is working towards meeting the needs of all within the means of the planet. This means making sure that no one falls short on life's essentials like food, housing, healthcare, while making sure that collectively we don't overshoot the regenerative capacity of the Earth. The One Planet Living approach and the EcoCity approach focus in on two key metrics, the ecological footprint and the consumption-based emission inventory, which are about meeting ecological limits in an equitable way. As well, it's important to use a guiding framework or principles, which includes the essentials of equity, well-being, and other social imperatives. There are many frameworks to choose from, like the One Planet Living Principles, the EcoCity Standards, or the Sustainable Development Goals. More on that later. First, let's talk about the metrics. The tool we use to understand ecological limits is the ecological footprint. It helps us figure out how close or how far we are from One Planet Living. The footprint concept was developed here in BC by Bill Rees and Matisse Bakkernagel. It's an estimate of how much land and water area an individual or population needs to produce all the resources it consumes and absorb all the waste it generates. We can use this to figure out our fair share of the planet's resources. It's also interesting to consider our fair share in terms of climate targets, and this is the second key metric. Global studies by Oxfam have revealed the dramatic correlation between income and emissions. They've shown that consumption emissions increase sharply with household income and are unequal within and across countries. In fact, the top 10% of earners generate half of global emissions, while the bottom earners, representing 50% of the population, are responsible for only 7% of global emissions. So there's great disparity across our countries, but also across our communities. Climate and ecological action needs to be fair. Collectively, we're drawing down our Earth's resources faster than the Earth can replenish, but at the same time, many people around the world are not meeting their basic needs. So to achieve One Planet Living, we need to follow a shrink and share model in which we reduce the impacts of high consumers in our societies, increase access to those that aren't meeting their basic needs, and simultaneously regenerating the natural capacity of the Earth to regenerate itself. And we've been drawing these resources down significantly since the dawn of the Industrial Revolution. So through this shrink and share and regenerate approach, we can build a new ecological balance and achieve One Planet Living. As I've mentioned, it isn't just about these metrics though. We need to adhere to sustainability principles. These could be the One Planet Living principles, the EcoCity standards, or the SDGs. Or I'd argue that each of these are suited to different audience types. The One Planet Living principles are well targeted to a general audience. The EcoCity standards are ideal for practitioners, and the Sustainable Development Goals are ideal for higher levels of government and multinational businesses. These frameworks all focus on making sure we're addressing sustainability holistically. They all bring health, equity, and well-being to the fore alongside planetary and ecological boundaries. We also have tools to help municipalities and others on this path. The EcoCity Footprint tool, which enables local governments to evaluate their ecological footprint and consumption-based emissions. And soon we hope to be using this tool at the university level as well. We're also developing the Lighter Footprint app, which will enable individuals to calculate their ecological footprint and consumption-based emissions. And we're working with the planning frameworks that I noted above, like the One Planet Living framework for community engagement, the EcoCity standards to guide the work of practitioners, and the SDGs for higher level institutions. I'm sorry I couldn't be at the session today in person, but my colleague Marian Mackey will be joining you to answer any questions, and I look forward to ongoing work with the university network. Thank you.
All right. Over to you, Corinne. I'll mute my line again now.
Thank you, and that's great. It seems strange to thank Cora in absentia, but that was a fantastic overview of One Planet Living. And this, now that we know what One Planet Living actually is, I'd like us to start at the beginning. And Vic, perhaps you can explain to everybody how the One Planet Living at Universities initiative came to exist.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. The concept, the framework actually was developed about 20 years ago, believe it or not, in the UK, and has been promoted by a group called Bioregional. It's quite easy to Google it, and it's quite a story of how that has developed around the world. I learned about it about 2-3 years ago, I guess, through a colleague at the University of Victoria, Trevor Hancock. Some of you would know him. And through the working group that's co-chaired by Corinne, we organized a webinar. I think it was in the middle of September of 2019, something like that. And fairly shortly, Cora was part of that presentation as well. And shortly after that, we had the annual University Advisory Council meeting. That would be in October, I believe. And this idea of doing something at the university level with the One Planet framework was promoted there. And that resulted just after that in a new working group. The working group was co-chaired, co-sponsored, I guess you could say, by both the UAC, the University Advisory Council, and the working group on climate change and health. we, over the next couple of months, became a small but active group that included people that you're going to meet today, and brings us to this event today. I think that's probably enough background, Corinne, I hope.
It absolutely is. Thank you, Vic. I appreciate that. And you're right that you've really brought a group of people together across CCGHR, but also across Canada, and to examine this issue and to start digging into what it looks like. And that brings me to my next question to Joanne and Angela in terms of why sustainability is important for Canadian universities. Why are we even talking about one planet living at universities? Joanne, maybe you'd like to go first.
Okay. Well, some stuff that's clear about university living in their own environment, being leaders in principle in research on climate changes, environmental issues, equities, and they can not only do research, they have to show how it works. And of course, they're training young people, many of whom will play an influential role in very different places. And that's another very good reason. And maybe for me, a third one would be to change academia practices. Because it's not only the university itself, it's also the way we do university stuff, the way we push for publication, the way we forget that most of our work should be in connection with communities, but we don't get time or room to do that. And the way we travel, maybe a bit too much. So we also have a role in changing this.
Great, thank you. Angela.
Yeah, so thank you. I think this is actually one of the easier questions of today to address. But first, I'd just like to mention that I'm calling from Mi'kma'ki, so unceded Mi'kmaq territory in what is otherwise known as Nova Scotia. And we do have treaties, but these treaties did not cede any territory, but recognize the different roles and relationships that settlers and the Mi'kmaq, Wolastoqey, and Passamaquoddy peoples have in this territory. And so for me, those treaties really underlie a lot of this work here in Nova Scotia or Mi'kma'ki. And so maybe we all have unique views on universities as well, but I think it's generally shared across institutions that our research, scholarship, teaching is intended to produce a better society. And so at least at Dalhousie, a stated priority is to try and address or find solutions to the world's biggest challenges. And I think as we move forward, those challenges will continue to cross those social equity, health, and environmental dimensions. And universities, of course, are spaces where we're encouraged to think critically about these challenges, but also places where we're embedded in them and definitely historically have played a role in producing inequities, perpetuating them. So I think we're actually really well situated to address these challenges. And then on a very practical level, universities are large contributors to our GHG emissions with our buildings, transportation, travel, investments in fossil fuel companies, other financial, let's say, entanglements. So we're necessary actors as well in meeting regional, national, and global climate goals. And I really like to draw on systems thinking to think of universities as systems that also engage with other systems. Again, some that are have really complex histories, sometimes of oppression, but also systems where, because we're engaged in learning and teaching, we can prototype new ways of being, and so move towards what could sustainability or environmental justice look like on our campuses in the broader systems and areas we live in.
Absolutely, and I agree with both of you that there are obligations as a university, being a university, to the university, but then, as you say, the university is not an island, and we are part of those larger systems. We're part of larger communities in many instances. And also, when you said, Angela, about the imperative that universities make a difference, I'm just thinking about how many universities have taglines that are similar. I know that the University of Saskatchewan is to be the university that the world needs, and I can think of many other universities, including Dal, as you've said, that have really taken on that outward look, but how far it goes is the question, for me at least, and I think for all of us. And that's the reason why we've been so engaged in this initiative. And that brings me to Thomas, because Thomas, you've spent the last 4 months really digging into the immersed in university sustainability plans. And so my question to you is how Canadian universities are doing when it comes to sustainability planning and implementation. We've just heard from Angela and from Joanne that there is an imperative, and universities are set up to be able to undertake sustainability in and of themselves, but also provide leadership to external to the university. So again, what have you found in the last 4 months, Thomas?
Well, I think the universities have realized this imperative in the last years. Before 2015, there were almost no planification plans, or it was really scattered and hard to find. But since 2017, 2018, there's a clear acceleration in the number of plans and policies released. From what I could research on the 30 members of the CCGHR, so the major universities in Canada, the vast majority of them have either an environmental policy or a formal plan for sustainability, and the 2/3 of them have a plan. So it's a good news there. We are doing better, and the universities are seeing this as a problematic. But the problem comes when we start at looking at those plans and what this planification looks like. So even though there's a willingness to go there, the plans themselves are not very rigorous. We can see from the start a very weak monitoring of sustainability in the plans. So out of the 30 universities evaluated, only 9 had quantitative indicators. So most of them are describing initiatives but are not quantifying the results in any way. And only 4 of the 30 universities have ever done a follow-up on any metric, quantitative metric. Also, when we look at specific subjects such as waste, half of the universities are not keeping track of the number of tons of waste they're producing, and only a quarter of the universities are doing an annual audit to know the type of waste. For the greenhouse gas emission, the GHG, the situation is a little bit better. 7 universities have never released an inventory, which is relatively low numbers, considering that 5 of them have fewer than 20,000 students. But again, only about a quarter, 7 universities are doing an annual inventory. So it's still quite partial. And this has consequences in, for example, the commitment, which is also pretty low in the plans. Most universities are not talking about, for example, sustainable investment in their plan or making commitment to go green on that side. And when they talk about investment, most of them are using vague terms or are on staying on the social side that is a bit more difficult to quantify. 13 universities have pledged to become carbon neutral in the next 30 years, which is not good, but it's fine. But it comes problematic when we look at what these commitment means, because the definition of carbon neutrality change with the plans. So some of them are talking about it's fine to pay to the leftovers emission. Others are saying, no, in 30 years, we won't produce any GHG in our campus. So it's hard to compare them. There's a wide variability. Also, in BC universities, they have to be carbon neutral by law since 2010. So it's not their choice, it's by law from the government. So there's some discrepancy there too. And the reference years they use for like, we will reduce for 80% of our reduction since this year. Well, the years they're using as a reference point is changing in almost every plan they're using, depending on their local situations. So it's really hard to understand the real scope, and there's a bit of a lack of rigor here. In the plans themselves, what I found in my research is that they are most of them focusing on the physical environmental, so the primary emission of greenhouse gas, and mostly the operation of the universities. So it's mostly what are we doing as an institution that is producing directly CO2, and what we are doing to do against that. That's the main focus of the plans. So we can talk about like waste, transport, procuration, energy, buildings, really operational subject, but the plans are going in much less detail and much less commitment regarding every other issues related to sustainability. So from the social perspective to the health perspective to the ecological welfare, and not only the CO2 production. So there are really lacks and overview in those plans. But the universities are starting to catch up, or not to catch up, but to understand the gravity of the situation.
Thanks, Thomas. I appreciate that. So the bottom line, the bottom line would be that universities are making progress, but there are still lots of opportunities, both as individual entities, but also as a collective across Canada. And that really leads me into the next set of questions, because I'd like to hear about how universities could reimagine sustainability. And I'm going to go to Joanne, Angela, and Vic to start off with. And we know that human health and environmental integrity are critical components of sustainability. You know, we're coming from the Climate Change and Health Working Group. And so we know that climate change and public health emergencies, such as the COVID pandemic, threaten sustainability. And we also know that this isn't just on university campuses, but we've seen it within countries and between countries globally over the last almost 2 years now. And so the fact that when we hear from Thomas's research that the sustainability plans really focus on the physical environment and resource use efficiency, I guess the first part of the question is, why should health and climate change be incorporated in sustainability planning at Canadian universities? And if the answer is yes, and you know, we think that they should be, then how could they be incorporated in sustainability planning? So how can we redress this overemphasis on the physical environment and start bringing in some of the social justice, inequities, health writ large, not just physical health, but mental, emotional, spiritual health, and climate change? So I'm going to go to Angela first this time, and then I'll go to Joanne and Vic, if that's okay.
Sounds good. So now everyone can see why I said the first question was the easy one. But I think this question is really interesting, and I think there are actually a number of approaches that would work well to incorporate health and equity and sustainability planning. I don't think it's a one-size-fits-all approach. And so Dalhousie, for example, does some really great work in sustainability, but then we have no overall health and well-being plan, as some other universities have. So adding health and well-being into existing sustainability plans could work well, or it could muddy the existing work and really what is, I think, uphill work trying to strengthen the sustainability mandate across the university. So I think an alternative could be to have a campus-specific health and well-being plan based on the Okanagan Charter of 2015, alongside the sustainability planning that integrates in appropriate areas. So that's one approach I think that could be applied at universities. And of course, in order for those different plans to work together effectively, I think there would need to be that foundational concept that we can't have a healthy planet without healthy and equitably served people, and vice versa. And so really recognizing that foundational concept for both of those plans. And again, it may work to incorporate them. But I think it could also work well to have them alongside as integrated plans to manage the scope. And I don't think this approach or this grounding would necessarily lead to new technical strategies to reduce emissions, which are really important and happening. But I do think it would lead to this foundational concept of recognizing the sort of interrelationship between health, equity, and sustainability would lead to a better analysis and understanding of who benefits from our sustainability planning, who's left out, and where the gaps are. And so, for example, when we think about housing, and again, thinking of the university as integrated into our cities and communities, who has access to housing near campus, how does being inadequately housed present health risks? What are the emission scenarios around some of these living situations? Are there disproportionate or inequitable outcomes of these strategies for lower wage staff, students, families? And then how does that impact the reach of active or public transportation strategies? So that's sort of one area, I think, where the health and equity piece, or I guess one example where analyzing from that framework could help us see where some of the gaps are in terms of equity in the planning. I'll stop there.
Joanne.
Yes, thank you, Angela. You made a, well, you said almost all. I will come back to the needed integration between these topics, I would say. And well, Thomas said it, many universities are not connecting health and the environment. And I would take an example on mine because almost at the same time, we started a plan for sustainability. And one of the first decisions was to change the name and not to talk about sustainable development, but to talk about eco-responsibility, which should be in principle all-encompassing. And the whole idea being that the whole idea is not focusing on development with all the issues that can be raised about the idea that we have to keep developing all the time. And also because it has to be to consider equities and diversities and stuff like that. But when you look at the application, you have on the one hand, a new health network that's being started to look at, to support the mental and physical health of employees. And you have the sustainability or eco-responsibility plan. And we have at my university is Université du Québec à Montréal, UQAM, and we've been renowned for all the work that's been done in community outreach. And this is absolutely and totally disconnected from the plan we're putting on for eco-responsibility, while it would be absolutely necessary to connect with those groups we are connected to anyway. So that's one of the difficulties, and that's one of the things people like us who've been working in one planet, one health, global health, ecosystem approaches to health are trying to say forever is that there is no connection between the environment, health, and society, and that we should be working together. One of the things we are doing at UQAM, we have a few institutes, which basically are groups of people on a topic that support the development of the topic. So my institute, for example, is health and society, but we do have one in health and the environment, and another one on international issues and so on. And the institute have decided to work together on various topics. And because they feel that those topics are connected. And we hope to be able to, to make those connections in a way that all those plans that we have in place are talking to one another. For right now, they are not yet. And what comes to this, and I won't dwell into this too much because you all know about that, all the people here, but we're confronted with different ways of thinking, interdisciplinarity, transdisciplinarity, intersectoriality, name it the way you want. And this is one of the difficulties. It's a lot more easier to focus on the topic and to say environmental issues are physical, and we just need to address how much carbon emission we're making at our university. So we have to keep going with the approaches that we've developed over the year, and we have to use them in our own universities. So that would be enough for me now.
Vic.
Thank you. Let me tell the stories of two universities out this way, where I am at the University of Victoria and UBC. I should have said earlier that I want to acknowledge that the University of Victoria is on the traditional territory of Songhees, Esquimalt, and Wozniak people. So at the University of Victoria, where I've been connected, I guess, for about 4 years now, there wasn't a health component in the sustainability, the current sustainability plan, which was just being revised about 2 years ago. So a few of us that were linked to the coalition actually tried to make a case of having something more explicit about health in the next plan, which is currently just being developed. And that's led to some quite good discussions that are underway now. I should also say that Trevor Hancock, who I mentioned before, he just retired as a professor. I think he's joined the club of failed retired professors, like some of us. Has been a strong proponent of One Planet Living as the framework for the university. Got a bit discouraged about that, has backed off a little himself, and has given quite remarkable leadership to more of a regional approach that includes the universities, the city itself, and some of the municipalities around in this area, in particular the university, the region of Saanich. The theme of fragmentation that my colleagues have mentioned applies here as well. There has been a group called the Anthropocene group, started by Trevor actually, that's been meeting monthly. And in the last year, that group did an inventory of all the centers and groups doing something about climate change. And it's an incredible list of, more than 100, I think. Long story short, there's a new president that's joined the university recently, and he's quite interested in doing something more systematic about this. So there now is on the table a proposal for an Institute of Planetary Health, and we'll see where all that goes. Over to UBC. To my mind, Thomas may want to comment on this later. It's one of the stronger examples of sustainability, led by a very active president. And she was the power, I think, behind UBC, I think being the first university in Canada to declare a climate emergency about a year or so ago. And there now is a climate emergency committee of the university itself, appointed by the president. The board of governors actually has a sustainability committee. There are funding opportunities of various kinds for students and other groups to do sustainability-like activities. And overall, I think it's quite a strong example of more or less a top-down, but very strong leadership from the president to make sustainability quite a strong feature in just about everywhere you look. Corinne, those are two examples from this part of the world. Thanks.
Thanks, Vic. I was struck by your referring to fragmentation and just thinking about, from my research, from I know other people's research as well, that Angela, you mentioned systems and systems thinking and coupled systems, and the recognition that people and the physical environment are interconnected and we have feedback loops. And so when we're talking about climate change, we're talking about global environmental change, we're talking about sustainability, you know, we can't divorce one from the other, because whatever happens in one system has impacts and creates change in the other system. And so that defragmenting the way in which universities approach these silos that are actually interconnected. And that was one of the things I know we've had conversations about when Thomas has been sharing his results with us as a group, but the potential for co-benefits and not recognizing or not being explicit about the fact that some of the initiatives that are focused on the physical environment on campuses actually will have health benefits. And then, Angela, I think you talked about the fact that we then have to make sure that these benefits are accruing to everybody and that there isn't anyone being left behind, to use the Sustainable Development Goal language, and to make sure that we aren't recreating or perpetuating systemic inequities when these plans are put forward. So it's about recognizing the co-benefits and making sure that those co-benefits are I guess, achieved and experienced by everyone. And so this really is, for us, an important conversation about the role that universities can play and what they can be doing. And so, Thomas, I'm going to go to you and just ask you about some of the tools that are available that can support universities in achieving sustainability. I know we'll get into some of the more specific programmatic examples and promising practices that you found, but just overarching tools and approaches that may be of interest to others when looking at how to expand on sustainability on campuses. And then Vic and Angela, I'm going to come back to you in case you've got another couple of examples that you can share with us.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm gonna have a little bit of fun and being a bit the devil advocates here, because I agree completely with the defragmentation and expanding, widening our view. But I'll take on what Joanne said about talking a bit less about calculating CO2 and seeing everything with a wider view. I think we do need to better account for CO2 and and have a strong basis to be able to construct. We really need to pave the road before and to have the topology of the terrain before paving the road upside. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't do everything in silos and focus on only one thing, but I think we need strong basis. And that's what the most pressing tools I think would need, and that was what Cora was saying, with the frameworks and the footprints, the ecological footprints, because we need to understand what is going on to be able to change it the most efficiently with all the partners after that. So to take an example, for example, if we want to build the best bicycle path in the world for going to the university, but only 10% of the individuals are using their bikes to go to the universities, well, we have other problems to solve and not just the path itself. Same thing if the university is on top of the mountain and we need to go to the university and bike, well, we need showers, we need racks on top of it. So we need to have facts on what's going on there. So there must be a comprehensive monitoring in a vast number of subjects on the campus to be able to act on it. And when I say comprehensive monitoring, of course, as I already said, the ones that are currently there are flawed, to say it like that. But we can also expand our view. So this monitoring should be extensive, just like Cora's was presenting it. So only half of the universities are integrating some scope 3 element of greenhouse gas inventories. So the scopes quickly is like first, the scope 1 is the CO2 produced on campus, so directly from the heating, for example. Scope 2 is where the energy is coming from. So do they have hydroelectricity or elsewhere? And scope 3 is the impact of the community on outside of the campus walls. So right now, there's only half of the universities that are integrating this scope 3 more wider view, and there definitely should be more monitoring on that to be able to act as a group, as a community, taking into account eco-responsibility too. And we also need proper resources and structure to be able to build on that. So we need budget and accountability. It's a bit crazy to say, but right now, almost no plan has a proper budget linked to initiatives precisely, nor a clear list of individuals responsible for every action in the plans. So it's more of a wish list, the sustainability plans right now, where the employees and the students and the faculties have to look at the plans and determine what they can do, but they are not accountable for those actions, and they don't have specific resources dedicated to it. So tools, interesting tool would be to have a real monitoring structure and real resource and accountability for every action that would need to take place. And with that, I think it would help greatly to defragmentate and to be able to bring everyone at the same table. Because if we let everyone just be like that without giving any task or centralizing and organizing the process, it's going to be way harder to have meaningful result at the end.
Thanks, Thomas. Angela, Vic?
Sure. Well, I know some folks at other universities were interested in one of the tools that Dalhousie used to do some flood risk mapping around climate. But I guess as a little precursor, I just wanted to say that I have not been personally involved in the sustainability planning at Dalhousie. And that office is a very small unit. And I think as we critically engage with all the things that aren't happening, also important to celebrate the work that has been done, because I think there are some really exciting initiatives that have happened on low resources. And a recent self-study that happened at Dalhousie around our own sustainability initiatives. And again, this was led by Rochelle Owen, who's in our Office of Sustainability, really grounded that self-study in principles of environmental justice, looking at our engagement with Mi'kmaq and Wolastoqey communities and nations and knowledge systems, as well as African Nova Scotian communities. There have been some initiatives, again, that are, I think, bringing in some of the the equity and health pieces. So a designated internship program for Wolastoqey and Mi'kmaq students and African Nova Scotian students, a sustainability lecture series that engages with the community, a outdoor eco lab based on Mi'kmaq knowledge and plant species with the Faculty of Science. So again, not necessarily happening in an integrated way, but exciting nonetheless. And so then back to sort of the practical, sort of technical tools, because I really do think we need both, and we need to be looking at our emissions and our adaptation to the climate impacts that are already underway. So as I'm sure you all know, Halifax is a coastal city with some significant storms, hurricanes, and also sea level rise, which will affect our university campuses and our communities. So as part of the climate change operations plan developed in 2019, the flood risks were modeled at the various campus sites. And that work happened in conjunction with the municipal climate adaptation planning. So I think that's kind of an exciting, again, technical tool to even think about how we respond to climate emergencies moving forward as campuses, because our communities will be affected as well. And I just wanted to note that they did have a few of the health, sort of health indicators in that plan as well. So one was around respiratory distress or heat stroke. Another was falls as a result of snow and ice. And the other was housing impacts in the surrounding community and on campus. So looking at some of those scope 3 pieces. And those were all seen to be of medium, or in the case of the housing, medium to low risk for climate risk in the future. And in terms of making this tool even more impactful, I guess I've been thinking about how we can use these, some of, again, this really excellent technical expertise that's, and the modeling that's happening for campuses to engage with wider communities, perhaps through our partnerships with international institutions, and think about, if there's an interest there, how we can be doing this modeling in a more comprehensive way to have more meaningful impact, especially with lower resourced institutions.
Thank you. Vic, did you have anything to add from UBC, or did you sort of say it earlier in the previous question? You're muted at the moment, Vic.
I was wondering whether Ryan from the Eco Cities group is with us at the moment. And if he is, he should speak about the ecological footprint tool and the additional work about adding a consumption component to that. But I don't see him on the list. Is he with us?
I don't think he's joining us until 11. He had a prior commitment, so he'll be here for the Q&A session. But
Okay.
That's certainly something if anyone would like more information on. And I know the website as well has more information, and there's even a beta handheld app that they're looking for, or we're looking for volunteers to test. So yes, we can certainly put that link in the chat for people as well.
Yeah, and maybe have him comment on it. I think that would be good. Maybe just a tad, one other story from the University of Victoria. In the earlier plan, there was quite an emphasis on, through student surveys and so on mental health, and particularly of students, accelerated a bit through the COVID experience, and some special attention to that as well. So that's one component to add to the discussion. Thanks.
Thank you. I'd just like to spend the last couple of minutes before we open up for questions from the audience. Just, Thomas, maybe you can share some of the promising practices that you identified from the UAC member institutions and from their sustainability plans. I know that there were several that came through that multiple institutions were engaging in as part of their sustainability plans.
Sorry, I missed it. Do you want like the more general initiatives, like in general universities and with some individuals too? How much time do we have? Because I could talk about initiative for a long time. I've seen a lot of them.
So perhaps those 3 or 4 initiatives that multiple institutions are doing, and then maybe pick a couple of favorites, knowing that it's personal bias, but a couple that struck you as really innovative and interesting.
Okay, so I'm gonna start for just a few hours. It's gonna be fine. In the general initiatives that I could find in a lot of places, I would separate them in 2 categories. The initiatives that were focused on resources. So, for example, providing green sustainability funds to the projects. On the monetary, there's also grants and prizes to encourage initiatives there. Many universities are using certifications from outside organizations, such as Fair Trade or Engineer Without Borders, or other organizations that are certifying the efforts of the universities. But the university also has internal certification. So many universities are certifying their labs, their offices, some events to be sustainable, to encourage the people inside the campus to try to act more sustainably on a day-to-day basis. And there's also initiatives in the mentality or the general working of the universities, such, well, the most obvious initiatives or program is the Campus Living Lab that almost all universities are talking and abording, although the universities are not all doing the same thing with the same name. So the Campus Living Lab is kind of a weird subject, but it's a bit everywhere to try to join research and action and helping the community. In research, there's a lot of center, institute, chairs, network dedicated to sustainability. So it's not direct resource action, but it has result on a more faculty-wide impacts. And there's also a lot of community-based learning. So more in the West, I would say, so the prairies, BCs, but to try to engage with the local communities and to have these program branded community-based is, or every names that it was really hard to find information with that. The names were changing rapidly, but yeah, so really resources, so monetary or certification, and in the mentality, so try to build bridges between people that I could find in many universities. But there were a lot of diversity in the action, which is also a problem because you already talked, Corinne, about working in silos. And I think the number of initiatives that I found that were in no other plans but were really good is a clear example of a lack of collaboration or communication, because many of those initiatives would be perfect in more than one universities. But I can think of many. For example, one of the really innovative universities is Sherbrooke Universities, where they are integrating student arts on campus widely. They have self-service refrigerators on the campus to share food before it expires. They have really, they are selling their own honey with pollinators inside the university. So they're really, really interesting. McMaster's University has really advanced cooking class from the university chef for the community, which have impact on health as we talked, but also linking the principle of sustainability in the daily life of the students. I have to admit, I have a weakness for astronomy more than astrology. So Queen's Universities has a program to encourage dark sky to reduce the light pollution, which we don't think about that much, but I find it really interesting to link that to sustainability. UQAM, Université de Québec à Montréal, is the first university in Canada to divest almost completely. So in just 3 years, showing that it's possibly to do so in a short time and not taking a 20-year plan to do so. I have to talk about UBC since Vic brought it on the spotlight, but it's true, they have really great initiatives and really great programs. I didn't analyze all the sustainability action, but they have really great initiatives such as mass timber high-rise building, I think. So for the student accommodation with innovating in engineering to try to bring sustainability in the daily life of the students. They have really interesting fish procuration policy because they're procuring a lot of fish for their cafeterias. Really interesting. One of my favorite projects is in Calgary. They have created a student club for building eco-friendly business suit for students that can't have the money to buy a student suit. So it bridges ecology and helping, well, equity in the market. Saskatchewan that are facilitating Indigenous people to graduate in graduate studies. Manitoba that has a program to encourage women in STEM by bringing women in research to the local schools, high schools, and clubs in the city. So a lot of different initiatives. Unfortunately, Vic also talked about mental health, and I have to admit they are barely talked about in the plans. So I've seen almost no mention of initiative related to mental health in the sustainability plan, which doesn't mean there's none, but they are often not linked with sustainability. So a bit of work there, but globally,
So,
a lot of initiatives.
I was going to say, I'm going to stop you there because you really could go on for 2 hours. And
Absolutely.
I will say that there are 3 pillars to this initiative, and it's to measure, map, and mobilize. And so, sorry, to map, measure, and mobilize. And so Thomas really has started the mapping piece. And as part of this, we're developing a compendium of resources that we'll be putting up on the website, hopefully relatively soon, so that people can share and see initiatives and then fit them and choose what others they might be able to do. And then the measuring is working with Cora et al. On a tool that can be used to try and identify our footprints and to be able to then manage. We always say, if you don't know, you can't manage. And so let's increase our knowledge of what we're doing and where we can improve and where we can intervene. And so then finally mobilize, and that's to mobilize action. We've got literally a couple of minutes because there are some questions that have come in from the audience already, and I'd like to be able to engage in them, but I don't want to miss out on this last piece of questioning. So I'm going to put it to Joanne, Angela, and Vic sort of collectively. And if you can kind of take a couple of key points, you may be breathing a sigh of relief. This was probably the most difficult question that I was posing to you, but it's also, again, Joanne, I'm going to put you on the spot because of your role with COPECAN, but it struck me that we're really in some ways talking eco-health, right? We're talking about the historical context, the current context of university campuses. We're talking about the equity dimension. We're talking about the engagement dimension. But I really would like your last couple of thoughts really quick on equity and determinants of health and integrating these into either the university sustainability plans, or Angela, you pointed out before about the fact that maybe the sustainability plans are sort of need to be able to get themselves going, and so adding more into it may actually stymie them a little bit. But how do we integrate, how do we make sure that these are being accounted for on the university campus, even if they're not necessarily embedded in those sustainability plans? I'm going to give you sort of 2 points each to wrap us up. Joanne.
Sorry. Yes, there would be plenty, but I'll just use Thomas' passion for astronomy to give an example and to suggest a way to go around it. When he said about the dark skies, this is all very nice. This is one of the very frequent proposal that we have for saving energy and better, less pollution and so on. But what happens when you close the light at night to women walking alone? We all know what happens. So, and what's the solution to this? Do we say we don't do that? Well, I think one of the solutions that theoretically we're supposed to be applying in Canada, but we don't most of the time, is differentiate analysis of every policy, of every action or solution that we're proposing. We have to look at the gender and intersectional issues. So how is this solution going to affect poor people, Indigenous people, women, whatever group you can think of? And most of the time we don't do this. And that may be related to what we were saying about fragmentation earlier. All of this is that when you're working in a fragmented way, well, nobody is telling you that you're not having such a great solution, because your solution works for one thing. I'll stop there.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Angela.
I think this will be quick because I was going to say a really similar thing, but really having that critical analysis of the policies that we're implementing for sustainability. So grounding them in principles of equity, anti-oppression, whatever sort of framework feels right for the context. And then there already are tools to do that. So intersectionality-based policy analysis, gender-based analysis, there are tools that exist. And then I think also really strong community engagement. So borrowing from some of our research methods in decolonial or anti-oppressive research and sort of applying them to our ways of engaging with communities to develop sustainability plans. Again, looking at both the university system, but how we're so embedded in the systems around us.
Thank you. Vic, you opened us up. You get to close us down with about 30 seconds and then over to Katrina.
All right. Just a reminder of Cora's first slide, I think, where she showed several frameworks, one of which was the sustainability development goals. And it strikes me that quite a lot more could be done in our universities about reminding people about their existence, weaving them into what we do in some way. I understand at University of Waterloo now has a special group of some kind trying to integrate the SDGs there. So that thought, and I really would like to come back to the key importance of community engagement as a way of learning much more about integration, equity, and so on. That's my 30 seconds.
Thank you. And thanks to all of you for engaging in this conversation. I've really appreciated it. Katrina, over to you.
Thanks so much to all of you. What a great, rich conversation, and some really interesting comments have been coming in the chat box. As I'm listening, I have so many thoughts, and one of the things that stands out to me strongly is I think we're in this such an important time. It's a pivotal moment where we get to decide how we're going to manage such an existential crisis that has come to a point where we actually don't have the privilege of not working together anymore. So we're really, we have to work together. And yet universities and society in general, Western society in general, are so caught up in a pace that doesn't allow us the time to make the connections and build the relationships that would actually help to connect these amazing things we already know with what we're doing. And there's such a frenetic desire to carve out our niche area in academia and be the expert in whatever. This like idea of individual competitiveness no longer serves the universities when we have such a massive collective problem that requires all of us working collectively together and to get over our fragmentation and actually use what we know and bring people together with all of the beautiful things they know, so that we can actually act. So those are some things on my mind, especially about time and fragmentation and taking the time to actually connect what we know with what we do in a good way that is inclusive of the people who need to be included. So I'll pause there and I'll just invite, so a few of you have written to me directly, and I don't want to put you on the spot if you're not willing, but I would just encourage you, this would be a great time to either you can raise your hand or just unmute your line. And Kate has offered a few links, which is really connecting some other synergies through the BC Coalition Institute and colleagues at SFU. Kate, do you want to say anything about the Living Lab or some of the work that's going on at SFU?
Yeah, first of all, Katrina, hi everyone. It was so lovely to hear about all this amazing work that is going around in different universities. I learned so much, and I can't say that I was actively or directly involved in many of these initiatives, but I was really proud seeing and following up with some of my colleagues who are working on this. And you might know Amaya Gilselson, who is a professor at Faculty of Health Sciences, and she is on the Advisory Council, Sustainability Advisory Council at SFU. She would be the right person to be here, and of course we can connect her. But what is really what one feature of the Living Lab is that it connects all the researchers on campus that is doing any kind of sustainability work. It's not just health focus, it's not just environmental science focus, it brings people together. And I just pointed out this one cool project that is even looking into the streaming media carbon impact on climate change. And so as a teaching faculty myself, I don't stop and think about what impact my teaching has on climate change. And this kind of research projects really put something in your mind, and recognizing that everything we do on campus has a long-lasting environmental impact. So I'm just so thrilled to see that so much work is going on different campuses. And Katrina, you already mentioned that connecting all of this is the next step. And I would love to put you in touch with people in SFU Sustainability Campus. And our project is very large. So there is a 2025 sustainability plan. And someone mentioned about mental health, and I searched the plan. There is no actually specific connection to mental health. There is health listed in the sustainability plan, but this is something we still can work on. But also the Healthy Campus Initiative is specifically focusing on learning and well-being in learning environments, and very heavy focus on mental health and physical environment on campus. So I don't know what else you want me to talk about, Katrina, but I hope this conversation is an ongoing one, and I hope we have more inclusive meeting when we invite people who work on the sustainability projects in these living labs to talk about their work.
Thanks so much, Kate. And I'll just see if any of the panelists want to respond, and then I'll turn it over to Rohit.
Well, just quickly, I just have to say that the campus as a living lab in SFU is definitely one of the best that I've seen across the 30 universities that I evaluated. I really like the way that it was a partnership with the local cities to try to find cohesion within, and it was really more planned and complex than most of the universities. So it's probably the right example to put in a spotlight today as a campus, as a living lab. Congratulations for that.
Thank you, Thomas. Thank you so much. If I can bring just one very quick example about environmental health and planetary health on campus. So with my health promotion class students, we looked on something that none of you probably will think has an environmental impact. So we did the cigarette butt cleaning event on campus, and we showed how much environmental pollution there is on campus from cigarette toxic waste that we create on campus. In 1 hour, we were able to collect 37 pounds of cigarette waste, 3 years in a row, even if campus puts so much money into cleaning our campus grounds. But even every year that we organize this butt cleaning with my students, so we were able to in 1 hour collect about 35 to 37 pounds of cigarette butts. You can imagine what's the environmental impact. And SFU is located on a beautiful mountain, lots of rain, and all these little cigarette butts that are leaching these toxic chemicals into our waterways back to our food. So, and students learn about this with really wide open eyes, that even cigarette smoking, we know all other health impacts, but what is the environmental impact of it? It's not necessarily often discussed.
Wow. Yeah, this is a powerful example, because if I think about, I mean, British Columbia is one of the provinces in Canada where smoking is actually like the least socially acceptable. So this is how that much you collect in a space where actually dropping a cigarette butt is heavily frowned upon. So even in a space where the social norms and rules would be such that we might assume that there would be not a lot to find. You find 35, 37 pounds. That's a lot. Those things don't weigh very much.
And there was real result of this. So our smoking policy was revised based on this project that students initiated. And we showed that there is much more harm that we're doing, not just to health as a secondhand smoke. Or we have very large international student community population, and smoking rates are a little bit higher among international students, especially from certain Asian countries where there's so our smoking policy is now revised, and we have only designated areas. We'll see when we're back to campus how we're going to enforce this, and I will report back about our collection of cigarette butts.
Great, thanks so much, Kate. Rohit, you had a great question. Do you want to unmute your line and ask the question to the panel? Are you there, Rohit? Oh,
yes, hello.
Hello.
So this has been a great conversation to hear, and thanks a lot, Katrina, for inviting me. I just thought that, planetary sustainability being a global issue, I respect what the Canadian universities are doing right now, but we have so many more opportunities right now, like not just focusing on the university campuses or the vicinities of the universities, but also the communities at large, and also globally. Canadian universities have such influence in other countries, and there are students coming in from other countries as well. So if we could extend this dialogue to more partners, more researchers and practitioners and countries, that will go a much longer way in helping us solve this problem. That was, and we could include more participants in the subsequent meetings that we have, that might increase the participation and the impact as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Rohit. So a good challenge to us to think about. So how are we acting both locally, but also thinking about the sphere of influence that Canadian universities have in the world and with our partners, and many of our universities have numerous memorandums of understanding with different partner countries around the global south in particular. So what are we doing to support and extend the dialogue and be inclusive, to really think about the climate crisis and what Canadians are contributing in terms of our own impact on climate change, but in how we're working together in solidarity with the partners who are most affected by climate change.
And Katrina, I'd just like to add there that there are two levels And, you know, there are the universities themselves, but then there's also Canadian Coalition for Global Health Research and what we're doing. And so in a lot of ways, we see this as a pilot methodology that hopefully can be expanded, and that other countries, other institutions around the world either engaged with CCGHR or independently will be able to perhaps create these conversations in their nation states. Vic, you wanted to say something and I may have stolen your thunder. I'm sorry.
Just reminding colleagues about IDRC's new strategy 2030, entitled A More Sustainable and Inclusive World. Could we do a better job of informing our colleagues in the Global South about opportunities for research and collaboration? I think it's quite an outstanding plan for the next 8 or 9 years that IDRC has put forward, and it's very much features sustainability. So just that reminder. Thanks.
Thanks, Vic. We have time for maybe either one more response from the panel about this issue, this question, and if not, then I'll have maybe one more quick question. But Angela or Joanne, do you have anything to add?
Only that before exporting, we have to give example. We're the highest polluters. We're the ones who are creating the worst situation. So we have to act. Yes, it is, and it's in global health that's pretty much what we do, working with partners abroad. But we have to push as hard as we can our own universities to do what they have to do.
Mm-hmm. And I would just add that I see that as part of that responsibility. So sort of full circle back to the beginning that universities play, especially given some of the historical context, involvement with slavery, these kind of things. Like these are really opportunities to think about where there's a possibility to, or where there's responsibility to act differently, especially given the disproportionate emissions and then impacts in different places.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for that. Corinne, do you have any final thoughts to add? And then maybe I'll just offer a sort of a closing and transition moment at the end.
I'd just like to thank everybody for their interest in this initiative. And if you want to continue to be part of the conversation, then as a working group, we're open to that. We're looking forward to having a tool developed with BCIT that can be used by universities. And so if universities are interested in piloting that tool, then they can certainly reach out to us. I'd like to thank the panel again, and thank you as well, and UAC for hosting us as part of this roundtable conversation series that you've got going. And again, thank you to the audience.
Thank you. Thanks so much. So thanks to Corinne and Angela, Thomas, Joanne, and Vic, and also to Cora for your contributions. This was a really interesting conversation. I've made some notes. I do think it's going to be an ongoing dialogue, an ongoing effort. For those of you that are joining us from the KT course, and Kate has also pointed it out, it's making me think, I wonder if there's a way to connect any of our case study groups, if we're still looking for some anchor topics, maybe they could connect in with your group if there's some support to continue to extend the dialogue. So that's on my mind, but also on my mind is how we bring this back into our UAC when we meet together again in the fall. So we'll have an opportunity for our annual workshop. And I think that this topic and this working group and what the UAC continues to do around it needs to be on our agenda. We need to continue to find ways to support that synergy. So that's also in my notes. I'm so grateful for the opportunity to have you join us and share your work with us, and we'll look forward to continue to hear more. Thelma, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
No, just to let everybody know that the recording will be available in a few days.
Beautiful. Thank you for that reminder. Yes, so we'll put it on the CCGHR YouTube channel so that you may be able to share it with colleagues or use it as a teaching resource. And for those from the KT course too, they've been thinking a lot about stakeholders. Who are stakeholders? How do we understand who needs to be included? So they've had some thoughts about this. We'll loop back in our KT course next Wednesday about it. But I'm sure they've learned a lot from listening and hearing your conversations and the many stakeholders that are included and part of this really complex solution-seeking work. So thanks so much. Mitakoyasin, all my relations, and we'll look forward to seeing you again sometime soon.